Hey guys, welcome back. This week we are going to write a letter based on The Outsiders. And it's not a traditional letter in the sense that for this one, you're going to choose one of the main characters, and your choices are Ponyboy, Johnny, Cherry, Derry, or Dally. So you're going to choose one of the characters, and then your entire letter is going to be written through that person's eyes. So you'll introduce yourself, and then you'll choose an event that happened, one of three events from chapters 4, 5, or 6, and retell that event through that character's eyes. So looking at the assignment instructions here, I just explained the first paragraph. Um, it's important to note that it doesn't matter whether your character was present at the scene. You can assume that he or she knew all of the details and is able to narrate it as if she or he was there. And so the way that you tell the story in your letter will depend on what that character's perspective of the event will be. So in this assignment, everywhere that you see a white box, that's somewhere that you need to type something. Your instructions, those will be in the yellow and green boxes. So this assignment, the character perspective letter planner, is where you will gather the information that you need to write your letter. So this one is a 20-point assignment, and it's a daily assignment grade. The character perspective letter will be a quiz project grade. So let's look at the assignment and then figure out what to do. Okay, so looking at part one, you have to choose a character. For me, and I'm going to do this with you, but I'm going to choose 2-Bit. And I know that 2-Bit isn't one of the characters that you can choose, and so I'm going to use him as an example. And then, you'll kind of follow suit with your character. Okay, so for part two, I need to identify a quote that accurately introduces and describes my character's physical characteristics. So essentially, what does 2-Bit look like? To do this, I went into the text, and so I went back to the PDF of The Outsiders that I have. And on page 9, I see this paragraph here that introduces 2-Bit. So I'm going to use this information. And I'm going to say, okay, so 2-Bit was the oldest wisecracker. He was about 6 feet tall, and sideburns. He had gray eyes and a wide grin, and he couldn't stop making funny remarks. So looking at that, I'm going to enter that information onto my planner. So in step 2, I took the information that I found on page 9 about 2-Bit, and I have recorded it. So I said page 9, and then I literally word for word. So it's quote copied word for word from the text. He was about 6 feet tall and stocky in build and very proud of his long, rusty-colored sideburns. He had gray eyes and a wide grin. So those are physical characteristics. That's what he looks like. So when I move on to step 3, in step 3 it says, identify a quote that accurately introduces your character's background characteristics. So introduce an important detail from the character's background that helps the reader understand who they are. And note, background details are usually present before the story begins. So it's like, what I need to know about 2-Bit is, well, one, why is he called 2-Bit? And then what does he act? Or how does he act? And really, the reason that I'm asking these questions, I'm trying to figure out is how this person acts. Like, are they nervous? Are they suspicious? Are they aggressive? Are they stern? Are they hilarious? That's really going to inform me on how I'm going to write the letter. Because again, my letter is written through this person's eyes. So knowing their background is pretty important. To get this information, I'm going to go back to this kind of introductory paragraph that I found on page 9. So it describes his physical characteristics, and then it says, he had gray eyes and a wide grin, and he couldn't stop making funny remarks to save his life. You couldn't shut up that guy. He always had to get his 2 bits in, his 2 bits worth in, hence his name. Okay, so I think that this is going to be really valuable background information. He's like the wisecracker, that friend that you have where they can't shut up and they're always making funny jokes, and sometimes they're funny and sometimes they're not. And I might include this one. Life was one big joke to 2-Bit. Okay, so I'm going to look and go back to that. Okay, so I've taken this information on 2-Bit that I've highlighted and I've pasted it now for step 3, which is background information. He couldn't stop making funny remarks to save his life. That is lowercase because it starts in the middle of a sentence. You couldn't shut up that guy. He always had to get his 2 bits worth, hence his name. Even his teachers forgot his real name was Keith, and we hardly remembered he had one. Life was one big joke to Two-Bit. So that's really important because this kind of informs where I go from here. All right. So in step 4, now I have to decide Two-Bit's dominant personality trait and identify 2 quotes that accurately show it. Okay. So start by choosing a personality trait that could describe your character at any point during the text. Then find 2 quotes from different chapters that show the person demonstrating this trait through their words, thoughts, or actions. Okay. So here, I have to decide what is this trait, and then I have to find some quotes that show what it means. So I have to choose a character trait for Two-Bit. As you seek to make your decisions, I've included an updated sample character traits. It's bigger than the one we had before, and you may find the character trait that you like on here, and you may not. For Two-Bit, I just felt like there wasn't quite one here, and so I decided to go to thesaurus.com. And the adjective I had in mind for Two-Bit is more of a noun. It's wisecracker. And so when I looked that up, and I wisecracker as in a joker, I came up with this thing, jokester or prankster. So I think I'm going to use jokester as my main character trait for Two-Bit. So when I go back to my assignment, I'm saying here, he is a jokester. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to find quotes, 2 quotes from the book that support this idea that Two-Bit is a jokester. And the reason I'm asking you to find 2, copied word for word, and my quotes have to be from different chapters. So really, if I've got the wrong adjective as his dominant trait, I'm not going to be able to find examples in different places. So for the first one, I'm going to go right back to this initial introduction. So here we've got Two-Bit now on page 9 and 10. And there's this one where it says, and again, I have to describe his actions. I can't have someone just describing him. So here, he was famous for shoplifting and his black-handled switchblade, which he couldn't have acquired without his first talent. And he was always smarting off to the cops. Now, this is Ponyboy describing Two-Bit, but it's an action that Two-Bit is taking. He was always smarting off to the cops. He really couldn't help it. Everything he said was so irresistibly funny that he just had to let the police in on it to brighten up their dull lives. So I'm going to take that and type it in on my description. So for my second quote, I need to find another example somewhere in the story that supports my idea that Two-Bit is a jokester. So for this one, I went back into the text online and I went to page 36. So that's in chapter 2. And Two-Bit and Johnny and Ponyboy are walking Marcia and Cherry home. And the car pulls up and Cherry says, "Hey, maybe they won't see us. Act normal." And Two-Bit says, "Who's acting? I'm a natural normal." So it's kind of his Joker thing. So this line right here, I'm going to use this as my second example. Okay, so now I've completed part 1. And part 1 is going to help me write the first paragraph of my letter. So in part 1, just to summarize, I've chosen a character. I've identified his physical characteristics, what he looks like. I've identified his background characteristics. And again, I'm doing this by exact quotes. I've identified what I think is his dominant personality trait. And Two-Bit's a really complex character, and I could use a lot of these. But right now, I'm going to focus on this as a jokester. So he was always smarting off to the cops. He couldn't help it. And then I've got this other example. So I have one example from chapter 1 and one example from chapter 2, which shows that this jokester thing will stay true with him. And again, they're both things that show. So it's not Ponyboy saying Two-Bit is this, but it's examples of Two-Bit actually doing that. In one of them, it's a description of something that he did, and another one, it's him actually doing it. So in part 2 now, I need to choose an event. So this is going to be like the second part of my letter, where I choose, and I've got 3 events to choose from. The first one is the scene at the fountain, which you know if you've read it, and I'm trying to be a little bit vague here in these descriptions because I don't want to give them away if you haven't read this far. So the second one is Pony and Johnny running away to Windrixville. And so kind of their initial events there in chapter 5. And then the third one is there's something big that happens at the church at the end of chapter 6. So you can choose one of these that you're going to describe through Two-Bit's eyes. Okay. For this one, I think I'm going to say the scene at the fountain. Okay. Now, what I need to do is identify who is there. So where does the event take place? So I'm not going to type these in because if you're doing this, you'll type this. But where does the event take place? So here I'm going back. Well, it's the fountain. Well, where is the fountain? Like, where's the vacant lot? Like, describe this place in Greaserville. Okay. Which characters are there? We know that Johnny and Pony are there, but there are other characters. Who are they? So identify them by name. So what caused this event? Like, there's this big thing that happens here that is really one of the most significant events in the book. So what caused it? Like, why did Johnny act in the way that he did? And then what happened? And again, what happened isn't just like the major thing that happens, but it's everything that leads up to it. So, the car shows up. Johnny and Ponyboy are there. Why are they there? What provokes the incident? What's the result? What happens afterwards? So that should all be in what happened. When you type that in, that's going to expand, your description is going to go down like this, okay? And then finally, what is your character's role? If you're telling this from Johnny's perspective, he's the central character in this. If you're telling it from Cherry's perspective, she wasn't there at all. And you want to say, Cherry wasn't there, but I get to act like Cherry was there and she knows everything about it. So that's what I'm going to type in these. When I go to step 3, and this is really important because this is going to shape how your character's perspective. So you're going to say, how do you think your character would view this event? What would their emotions and perspective be about it? Describe and explain in 2 to 3 sentences. Okay. So if I'm talking about the event at the fountain and I'm Cherry, I'm really worried, right? Because I'm a really compassionate person and I care about the welfare of others and I don't really take sides necessarily. If I'm Johnny, I was there and I'm scared to death. If I'm Dally, where I've kind of given up on the world, I have a different perspective again. So this is where, based on the character that you said, you're going to say, like, what does this person think about this? How do they view it? So you've already said what happened, but like, what are their emotions? Okay. Are they dismissive? Are they, frightened? Are they agitated? Are they disappointed? And why? Okay. What you write here, again, you're not doing this assignment just to do it. This assignment is going to guide you in writing your letter, which is a really significant assignment. And that's the second step that you'll do. This one is due Wednesday. Your letter is due on Friday.